Hey YouTube, today we're going to be looking at the greatest semi-automatic pistol that was ever designed, and what we have here in front of us is a pair of Colt 1911s chambered in 45 ACP. And before we go any further, I'm going to show you that neither one of these pistols have anything in them, and we are clear to make this video. We have never discharged a weapon on this channel, and we're not going to start today, folks. So what we have here is an original Colt 1911 from the year 1918. This was a government issued 1911, and the one on the bottom is a Series 70 Colt 1911, also chambered in 45 ACP. Now, a little bit of history about the 1911. The 1911 was designed by a gentleman named John Moses Browning, and it was designed and put into service in, you guessed it, 1911. And what we have here is an original design one, and this was actually a military issued Colt 1911. This particular one was made in 1918. I'm going to show you some of the close-ups of it. It says model of 1911 U.S. Army, and on the side here it says United States property and has a serial number. On the other side has a bunch of patent dates, everything like that, and it has a little Colt rampant pony, has double diamond checker grips on them. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is when they hear the term 1911, they think of all these guns in 1911, and they're actually wrong. This is the only actual 1911 that exists, the Colt original 1911. Anything after that is a 1911 A1, and we're going to go into that. That's what this video is all about. So what I'm going to do is tell you some of the changes that went through with the 1911. I know that a lot of people have probably been over this before, but I've never done it, and I'm going to put my own little spin on it, and I'm going to show you some of the differences. So this is an original Colt 1911, and its features on this gun is it is a semi-automatic regular fired 45 ACP. The original one's held 7 rounds, and this one has a little lanyard loop on it, and has a shortened beaver tail on it, has a regular hammer on it. It has probably the most terrible sights that you could possibly ever look through to pick up on them. I can't even get the front one to focus, and it does not have any scalloping here. It has no texturing on the front. There is no lowered down ejection port. It's about as high as can be, just straight up and down serrations, and it has a long trigger on it. This was the original design. Now, when these guns came out, they got a lot of feedback from the soldiers that were using them, and they asked what they could do to improve them. So in 1924, they came through with some revisions, and that's what we have right here. Now, folks, I don't have a actual A1 from the 1920s to the 1940s or anything like that. It was used in World War II, and a lot of people think of the A1 as a World War II gun, and they think of the original one as a World War I gun. It's actually not true. They were both used all the way to up until the 80s. 1989 to be exact, when they stopped the military, changed over to the Beretta. But this is an actual A1. This is a 1978 made Series 70, and there has been absolutely no changes to these government model guns from 1924 until the year 1970, and the only change before we get into them from the original A1s to this Series 70 is this collet bushing right here, this barrel bushing, and you can't even tell that from the outside, but it has a different type of barrel bushing on it that makes it more accurate in the Series 70, and that's why they call it the Series 70. That's what made it a Series 70. But other than that, in 1924 they made some revisions to the 1911, and from then on it became known as the 1911 A1, not just the M1911. This is a M1911 A1. So the changes they made on them is, first thing you'll notice right here is the frame is a little scalloped out right here, and that gives the shooter a little bit more room to get his finger in here, especially if he's wearing gloves or something like that. And the next change they made is they made a shorter trigger on them, so the trigger is sufficiently shorter, and I'll show it a little side by side here in a second. A little bit shorter trigger on it. The next change they made is they made this beaver tail a little bit longer. for when the shooter was holding his hands and this hammer was coming down, it didn't send to interfere and give you what they call hammer bite. The next change they made on this thing was they put a little bit better sights on him. And folks, when I say a little bit better, I do mean a little bit. It's not a lot better, but they are a little bit better. The next change they made was they lowered this ejection port down just a little bit, not a lot, but just a little bit on the A1s. And the final change that they made on them, and this was all because of input from the soldiers using them, they put this arched mainspring housing on them. And I guess the people thought it was more comfortable to hold it in their hand with an arched mainspring housing. It's all personal preference. Arch mainspring housings and flat mainspring housings seem to be you either love one or you love the other. You don't love both. And I'm a flat mainspring housing guy, but that's what came on this particular gun, and I'm not going to deviate away from it. But they did change it to an arch mainspring housing. So we're going to show you side by side some of the differences. We'll start off with what we just talked about. The original 1911 had a flat mainspring housing, and 1924 they changed to an arch mainspring housing. Next thing we're going to look at is this beaver tail, and this one is non-existent, folks. On the original 1911, this beaver tail, if you were high gripped on it, you could possibly hit your hand right here and get what they call hammer bite. So that was a big complaint from the soldiers. So what they did is they extended it out just a little bit to where it protects your hand from the hammer. As you can see, it will not hit your hand now with that extended beaver tail on it. Next thing they did was the sights, and I'm going to have to show you side by side here at the sight picture, and they made a little bit better sights on them, but if you'll look at it, there's not that big a difference. But the one on the right is the original 1911, and the one on the left is the A1 sights, and there's not a lot of difference, but they are a little bit better on them. So the next thing we're going to go into is the scalloping right here on the frame. So this gives you a little bit more room to put your finger in here, especially if you're wearing gloves or something like that. It gives you a little bit more room to contour your finger in there, so the frame is a little bit scalloped out. On the original 1911, it had no scalloping on it, so it was just straight cut across, and that's how it was. And the next difference we're going to show you here is the trigger. They put a short trigger on it in the A1 model. Give you a lot more room in here for maneuvering around inside this trigger bow. The original 1911 had a very long trigger on it, so there wasn't quite enough room. So together with the known scalloping and the long trigger, it gave you a lot less room here to work with. So we'll look at the ejection port. On the ejection port, it's lowered down just a little bit. It makes the shells eject out just a little bit better. And on the original one, if you'll notice right along the slide line, that's as far down as it went. So there's some of the differences in an original 1911 and a 1911 A1. Now, I'm sure there's some other differences that I missed here and there, and I'm sure I will be corrected in them, but the basic differences is the trigger, scalloping, the mainspring housing, the sights, and the ejection port on them. That's the main differences that they change, and the arch mainspring housing here. That's the main differences they got from the soldiers that were using these guns, and that thus became the model A1 in 1924. And the A1 remained unchanged in the government model. Now, we're not talking about any of the fancy gold cups or anything, but in the government model, this gun remained exactly the same with all the exact features until 1970, when this one here was made, and they changed a little bushing on the end, but it was still the same basic A1 style government model Colt 1911. And a lot of people say if you don't have a Colt 1911, it's an imposter, because Colt was the first one to make the 1911, and in my opinion, it was the greatest semi-automatic pistol that was ever designed. It has the best trigger on it, and they're very reliable if you use good magazines and you know how to run one. So if you have any questions on the difference in an original 1911 called the M1911 that was made from 1911 until 1924, and the A1 model that was made from 1924 till the present, let me know and I will be happy to answer them for you. Thank you very much for watching my video today, and you folks have a great day.